This week on In Post, we're blending a bunch of images together to get some nice traffic streaks in Barcelona, Spain. Hi everybody, welcome back to In Post. My name is Scott Davenport, and this week we are continuing from where In the Field left off for the Plaza de Espana in Barcelona, Spain. So if you haven't watched that episode, you may want to pop over and take a look for maximum enjoyment here so you can have an appreciation for a couple of the challenges for the shoot, in particular camera vibration, and that plays a part in the post-processing. And so really what this is primarily about is blending a bunch of images together to get some nice smooth traffic trails all the way through the scene and around this nice architecture in this square in Barcelona. So without further ado, let's jump over to the machine and get started. So these are the 6 images that we're going to work with to create the final version of the Plaza de Espana with all the traffic circling around it. And you can tell just by looking at the sky from this first image here all the way to the last, these were taken over a period of several minutes, actually probably more like 30 to 40 minutes. And that was for several reasons. One was to get plenty of traffic going through the circle. You can see like in this this first one here, we have a stoppage of traffic in the very foreground. Here it's clear, but there's stoppage of traffic here, and so on and so forth. This side's nice and clear, and this one we've got a nice flow in on the left side. And so I want to take all the pieces of these various things and blend them together. The other thing is the crispness of the architecture itself. And if you watch the In the Field episode, you'll have seen the discussion I had about getting this the statue and the buildings to be crisp was challenging because of what I was standing on to take the shot. If I zoom in here, you can see that this sign is pretty sharp. That's pretty good. Compared with another one, this one's not bad. Third one, this is fuzzy, right? And so therefore, the buildings are fuzzy. The fuzziness is going to be fine for things that like the traffic streaks. Those aren't sharp and those can weave and wobble a little bit. But for the buildings themselves, these need to be crisp. And so I've chosen this one here, which I put 5 stars on just as an indicator so I know which photo to begin with. This will be my base layer. And then everything else from the grid I'm going to use to blend in the different traffic trails. So I'm going to select all of these and then do File, Plug in Extras, Open as Layers in Perfect Layers 9. I'll show you a bit of the blending and then show you the final result. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hang on, let's take a look. There's some things I did in Develop before we go into layers. So let me grab just one of these. I'll use our base layer, pop over into the Develop module. We'll take a quick peek at the settings that were used to do some initial styling on the photo. Really not much. I shouldn't even say styling. This is really more a matter of just getting the basics down. Lens corrections, always turning that on. You can see the before and the after. Correct a little bit of vignetting and bowing. And then the rest of it was in the basic panel. So I set the white balance, and how I did that was I just used the eyedropper and chose something that should be white in the photo. And these buildings were mostly white, and so this area just above that sign we were looking at a minute ago, selected that. And then played with exposure, raised it up a little bit, boosted contrast, and adjusted the white and black points. I didn't play much with highlights and shadows because there's going to be some wiggle room there when we get into blending things. And also played with clarity and vibrance. Now, how did this work for the rest of the images? I'll just pick the one next to it over here. Now, when I do, you're going to notice that none of the tone or presence settings changed. I'll go back again. You can see that happen, right? Previous one, same settings. Next one. So I just lifted and all of the settings from the image I adjusted and laid those all down on every other photo that I'm going to use. What I continued to play with, though, in each photo individually was the white balance, using that eyedropper and picking roughly the same spot on each photo to try to get a reasonable balance for the whites across what is, a long time period. And there's more of a bluish cast in this photo versus the one I took earlier in the evening, which is much brighter and whiter, and trying to maintain that as much as possible. It's not going to be perfect, but to bias things so that the blending will be smoother and the ending result will be more believable. So now we're ready to go into the photo suite. So I'll select all these images and we'll get on over there. With all 6 layers loaded into Perfect Layers, you can see on the top I have the layer that was the crispest. So the buildings, the architecture, everything is in good, sharp focus. And then the remaining underneath, you can hide this one, you'll see the next one, some traffic trails, and so on down the line. Let me show you how I did the blending for one of the layers, and then it's the same process for the remainder. So I'm going to take this layer, which was taken at night, or closer to, excuse me, closer to dusk, which has some nice trails going through the right-hand side. I'm going to drag that up to the top of my layer stack, and I'm going to re-enable the base layer. So let's actually name these so we can keep track. This will be red on the right, and this one will be base. I'm just double clicking on the name to rename it. Now for red on the right, the first thing I want to do is change the blending mode. Now the lighten blending mode works pretty well for trails. You take your darker layer, which is, go back to normal here, which is the layer at night, and you put that on top of a brighter base layer. And what the lighten blending mode will do is compare this layer that I'm selecting it on to what's underneath, and then only show me what is brighter. So a lot of things are coming through here. When I toggle it off and on, you're going to see the lights in the skies go up, maybe more lights in the building, and definitely the traffic. And that's really what I'm after right now. So we're seeing some swoops of this traffic in here. So I'm just toggling this on and off to see if there's anything that I don't like. And by and large, this is looking pretty good. I am getting some of this, looks like, a Jeep in the lower part of the frame that I really don't want. So what I can do now is use the masking brush. It's automatically set to paint out. And let's get a little bit larger brush. We'll make our feather wide and just start to paint that away because I don't need that part of it. I just want that nice smooth trail. And I do the same thing in other areas. I'll toggle this off and on. Are there any other parked cars that are showing up that I don't need or I don't want? This taxi here is showing up. I don't need that, so we can brush that out. And you get the idea. I do this over and over again. When I'm happy with this layer, I select merge layer. That's going to take, in this case, red on right and squash it down on top of the base. Wait for that to finish. There we go. And then I'll move on to the next layer. Drag a layer up to the top, switch the blending mode to lighten, lather, rinse, repeat. And when I'm all finished with that process, I've done that, and through the magic of video, we can take a look at it. This is what I ended up with. So I've got lots of nice traffic all zooming through here. The buildings are nice and crisp. It brought in a few accents at the horizon for some of the city and the town lights coming up in the background. And this layer is ready to be touched up a little bit more and then stylized. So now let's take a look at that process. All right, so the first thing I did was I duplicated this layer. So with the duplicate button, created a new copy of it. And the reason I did that is because there is some retouching that I need to do first. These street lights I don't like, this one here too. There's a bit of an artifact from some of the blending I did where there was a portion of a bus that was coming through here. I don't like that. There's some, bits of cars here that I don't like. There's a whole lot of little white bits of trash that are all through the otherwise nice green circle here in the center. A few of the city lights I think are a little distracting, like these ones on the tree line and the edges there, and some here that just don't seem to fit anywhere else. This bus and this taxi down in the corner, all these just various things I want to do to clean up. So let me turn off the effects layer and show you what I did here. So here's after I've cleaned up, here's before. And how did I accomplish this? Through a variety of eraser, retouching, and cloning tools. I've done other videos on my basic techniques for this. I've got a complete video course on how to go do all these things, and you can see you can get some very, very good results. I think the only thing that looks a little unusual is the lower right. It looks a little dingy, but I know when I stylize, I'll be adding a vignette, and that's going to blend in and not be noticeable in the final product. So speaking of the final product, let's jump over into effects, get some stylization for this, and finish it off. In effects, all right, we've got a big old filter stack. So yeah, I did quite a number of things to this. I'll walk through it at a brisk pace, but you can play the video slower. You can see all of the settings and tunings and tweakings if you like. So here's the retouched image. I said we took out some of these distracting elements along the bottom, some of the more egregious chunks of car through here. First is the tone enhancer, and this was just an overall warm things up just a little bit. Took just a tug down to get the blue cast gone. Reds didn't touch, greens didn't touch. This is really just to take the edge off that. You can see the blues and the buildings in particular by turning that layer back on. So my little cursor thing on there. You can see where I'm clicking. That just took brought the buildings back to being their more whitish color that they were. Next, dynamic contrast. Very, very basic settings. Natural setting to start with. I brought the smalls up just a hair. They normally are at 0. And I brought the larges down about halfway from the default setting for natural. And that just added some nice crispness everywhere. The local contrast making everything just punch a little bit more and be a little nicer. Tone enhancer. Now this one, you should be able to see the effect pretty dramatically. There we go. Now notice the mask here in the window. It's the roadways, right? It's circling the road and going up in the distance. So toggling off, toggling back on. And again, that was all playing in the tone curve space. And all I did was start with this point here, drag it down a little bit. If you don't know how the tone curve works, I have a set of videos that dive into the tone enhancer from top to bottom. But very quickly, this side of the curve is your shadows, this side of the curve is your highlights. So I'm darkening the shadows just a little bit. So that's making the road become blacker, the asphalt becomes black. And this other point is just to anchor everything, so I'm not affecting the lower midtones, upper midtones, or the highlights themselves. That gives the road a darker feel. Next, an adjustment brush, and this was purely for the sky. So you can see the sky has gotten nice and blue. It brought the brightness down. I cooled off the temperature a little bit as well, just to emphasize that darker sky. I could have done some blending potentially, because this is similar to the sky that was present when I took the shots later in the evening. I just chose to do it with an adjustment brush. It's really whichever way you'd like to. Color enhancer. We're going to see the reds pop. I'm sorry, not the reds. The greens of the grass. Yeah, grass is not red; it's green. In the center here, so make that stand out a little bit more. And this is a slightly modified version of the green enhancer. So we have, oh, come on, catch up, computer. There we go. We have the yellow hue being shifted toward green, the saturation bumped a little bit, and then the greens themselves also getting more saturated. Now it looks like it's lost my mask because I was playing around with that. So let's undo 1, 2. All right, well, I will not save this once I finish the video. But you can see, because without the mask, I'm getting greens boosting here, green reflections in these buildings. You'll just have to ignore that for the rest of this because I lost my mask. Another color enhancer. This is for the reds of the traffic, and so we're just taking the magentas and shifting those toward reds, so these red traffic trails become a richer, deeper red. No masking involved. The sunshine layer. This is another interesting one. After I'd done those other two color adjustments, things felt a little on the dark side, so I just warmed up things overall with just a touch there. And I didn't do this at full opacity. This is at 2/3 of the strength of that filter. The next adjustment brush, you can see the mask has just got these two little lines here. It's for these two columns and the building. And so when I click that on, we're going to see those just brighten up just a little bit. So you can see here we've added detail and another touch of warmth just for those sections of the photo. I wanted this to be the centerpiece, of course, and your eye to wander back toward this art museum here. And the circles of traffic are going to help keep our eyes contained inside the frame and hopefully lead back to this little path down the end. And last but not least, vignette. If you've seen past videos, you'll know how I do vignettes. Down in the controls, I'll start with the brightness all the way at the bottom. I'll also put the feather all the way at the bottom so I can see exactly where the edges of the vignette are. Here I just want the corners to get darkened. And this is where that kind of messy smudges from the retouching are going to go away. And then adjust the size, adjust the roundness to taste, and I tend to like a nice soft feather. And so there we go. So that was the before and the after. So as you might imagine, this process took a lot of work. There was a lot of blending to do, a lot of detail in removing distracting cars and segments of cars, ghosts of cars that came through as I blended one image through to another. The light and blending mode helped a lot. Where it became a little trouble is things like whiter cars or brighter colored cars. Those start to shine through as well. But in the end, I'm glad I spent the amount of time on it and came away with the real image that I had in my head when I was out on location. So the tip of the week is the lighten blending mode. It is great for doing things like traffic trails. You could also do it for things like star trails if you, so long as you don't have too many gaps in between your photos. Lighten, stacking up a bunch of photos and using the lighten blending mode to get them all together and get those nice smooth star trails. So it's a great tool to have in your toolbox. That is it for this week in post. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, give me a thumbs up, a like, a +1, wherever you're viewing this, as some way to let me know that you got something out of this. And that helps me get back to the machine, get back to doing these videos. So until next time, my name's Scott Davenport, and thanks very much for joining me.